Hello, welcome to another live Google Hangout on the Living Income Guaranteed. Today is our 52nd episode, which means we've been running this for a year, a little bit more actually. So thanks for watching and thanks for joining us today. And we have a very interesting discussion that is based on the topic of conspicuous consumption. And what does this mean? How do we participate in it? And what is this all about? Why is it relevant to the context of providing a living income guarantee? We will be discussing all of this today with Maite, Zamora Moreno, one of the main writers and participants in the living income guaranteed movement. So thanks, Maite, for being here.
Hi, everyone.
And so, to everyone that's watching, let's keep in mind that you're able to comment, ask questions using the information that appears in the YouTube video, say Q&A, be part of the conversation. You click there and then you open up your Google Plus, and there you will be able to add your questions as well as on the Google Plus event itself. So today we will begin with, what does conspicuous consumption mean, Maite? What does this concept entail? How was it created? Where does it come from? Tell us more about it, please.
Okay, so conspicuous consumption basically refers to when we spend money on something that we don't actually need, but that we buy from the perspective of trying to gain a certain status or trying to keep up with your peers. So it's more about how you present yourself and how other people will perceive you than really about yourself. So in terms of the history of conspicuous consumption, a lot of people know the terms or the phrase keeping up with the Jones. So that is basically how it started, where initially people would look at their neighbors who relatively had the same kind of income as yourself and look at what do they have, what are they doing, what are they buying, and then try and copy them out of fear of falling behind or losing status in your neighborhood. Then later it evolved to looking at your colleagues and other people at your workplace, which includes the boss. Now the boss, of course, has a higher income. So then, even though the boss has a higher income, people would still try and do the same things the boss does, try and have and own the same things the boss has. And then later, to keep it short, it started escalating entirely to what we have now in society, which is everyone tries to have the same things and do the same things that celebrities do. So everyone, no matter what the income bracket you're in, is trying to live a lifestyle that is presented and portrayed in the magazines of the rich and famous. So that is the basics of conspicuous consumption that we'll be discussing today.
Cool. And for everyone that has just tuned in, we have our second participant, who is Jane Kenney. Hi, Jane. Okay, she's muted, so let's see how to...
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now.
Okay, cool. Hi, everybody.
Thanks for joining us, Jean. And to begin with, also from your perspective, you will be giving us also part of your own research, which is also a topic that you very much enjoy talking about, which is consumerism and how it is promoted everywhere. So what have you noticed in relation to this? How is it embedded in our culture?
Well, I think you have to go right back to the very beginning of time, almost, of our human history, because it's really an outgrowth of our exchange of our labor for profit. And I think that's really the root of it, is that our labor is a commodity, that our starting point is that our labor is a commodity. And so therefore we accept the commodification, if you will, of life, of things, of resources of the world. So that starting point is rooted in a type of competition because there obviously isn't enough in the minds of people. There's an idea that there isn't enough to go around, or that obviously we see that some people have a lot more than others. So this idea of conspicuous consumption is kind of a badge of victory in a system that is based on the commodification of your labor, whereas where you see if you have things that you can show signify your wealth, it means a certain freedom that you have from the slavery of trading your labor for money. And so most people are not in a position to be as calculating. They don't think in terms of those ways. They grow up and they accept the system as it is. They don't realize it's a construct that was created. And so they're not in a position to provide for their children to have an escape route, in a sense. So they accept it and seek out these outward manifestations. And this is, of course, me speaking. This isn't some, doctrine, but that these outward symbols reflect their freedom from this type of indentured life. For instance, in my business, I sort of work in the center of this fashion, glamour, entertainment industry. And one of the things that they noted is that women who spend these inordinate amount of money on handbags, for instance, they ask them, why are you spending $1,300 on a handbag? And they said, it's amazing that that they actually know what their motive is, and they said, because it shows that somebody cares that much about me. Like, my husband loves me this much that I have this handbag, and it's a status symbol. It's a status of a certain type of freedom in the free market, which is not free because it's actually compulsory. We don't really.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we don't really have a choice, but we're led to believe it's like it's like a world in reverse. It's called the free market, but where is the choice in that? So this kind of consumption is sort of like a drug or a panacea. It helps people cope with this kind of realization that, unless we change this is what we're left with, or there's no hope of getting out, so, where's my handbag?
Exactly, and also, taking all of this into what we are essentially going to be discussing and going in depth into is that commodification of life. Yes, creating a value in separation of, seeing the utility of things and then making use of them. Through and with the creation of money, of course, came then the values that we give onto things. The more difficult it is to get, then the more value it also has. And we were commenting also with Maite how, tribes also had this from the beginning of time, getting a certain part of an animal that was not easy to catch as some form of status element to their lives. And this has been like part of our humanity from the beginning of time, I fully agree. But, this term that Thorstein Veblen came to create as a way to place it onto the table in discussions of economics has then prevailed throughout the past century, and we haven't moved on from it. And now it keeps evolving and evolving in a more conspicuous manner, to be redundant. So let's go on to more examples of how we directly participate in this. So Maite, which other examples can you give us of how we participate in conspicuous consumption?
Well, if you look at your foods that are delicates, those types of foods that are very rare, I mean, to me, they even sound like I would never want to eat them. But apparently, if you're able to afford it, or you're able to afford to go to a restaurant that makes it, then it makes you a person that is part of a certain elite, and it makes you feel good about yourself. Whereas if you look at the actual food, like say, I don't know, maybe frog legs, frog eggs, things like that, it's not something that sounds appealing to me, but gotten the status because so few people actually eat it. So those kinds of irrational things that we do, we don't even look at what the product is, where does it come from? I mean, what is it that makes it so valuable? Because nothing does. It's only the idea that it is valuable that makes us want to have it. What's other examples? Even we don't even have to go to the very rich. I mean, even in the middle class, you can see how people want to always, for instance, have the newest cell phone. There is nothing wrong with their current one, but because there's a newer one out there, and all the friends have it, and all the other family members have it, and we feel like we just need to have this new phone. When it's a phone, I mean, the basic function of a phone is that you're able to make phone calls or maybe send text messages. But now it's like, it's got a slightly better camera, it's got slightly more apps, it's slightly faster, it's got a slightly longer battery life, and apparently that makes it so much better or so much more valuable. So all these things that we spend money on that we don't consider whether we need it or to what extent it's going to change our life. Where very often when you get the product and you buy it, you have this rush, like I finally have it, or I finally done this, and you feel great about yourself. But after a while, you just start realizing, okay, it's just a phone. And it just becomes, you see that it's the object or the service that it really is. Because the value that you gave to it, the special status that you gave to it, that was just an idea in your own head, so to speak. But that's not something that you experience later on, because it's not actually part of the product. So
Exactly.
yeah, those are kinds of examples.
It's like an experience that we add on to a product in essence. So Jean, can you tell us more about how this is passed on, for example, from peer pressure or your environmental influence? Can you give us some examples?
Well, I mean, a lot of it just doesn't come out of thin air. A lot of it is, a science that's been developed over 100 years, more than that, in terms of marketing. And the father of modern marketing, Mr. Bernays, learned from his uncle Freud techniques that were used to create beliefs, create wants, create so-called needs. And it's been very effective. So a lot of the things that we think we want, we don't need. But because we are susceptible, as I said, because basically I think most of us know that this is not a very productive or sustainable way to live, to just keep taking the resources and creating, products that don't last, that aren't meant to last. And so I think there's a kind of sense that everyone has that this is not the way we should be living, especially in America, where we have an American Indian, we have a traditional native culture that wasn't completely annihilated, that did consider the effect of what one generation would do 7 generations forward. So I think in the unconscious in the United States, at any rate, there is this sense of that this isn't right, and yet there is the compulsion to continue it, and that's where I think marketing really comes into play. And so I would say that, this idea that we're all individuals, that you have to make your individual statement and your individual mark. It's kind of based on game theory, that we're out there competing with each other and, who gets the golden ring, and that kind of psychological climate, that we bring our children up in. I mean, I know I was brought up like that too, was just, make sure you know how to compete, have common sense, because that's the way it is. And so in a workplace, you want to stand out. You want to be the one, if you want to get ahead, if you, you have to know which way the wind's blowing. You have to dress a certain way. You have to bring the right products. In a sense, people judge you by the products that you own and you wear and you support. So it's very complicated because it's so conspicuous consumption is so entrenched, I think, in the whole way that we live our lives, and you can't separate it anymore. It's like self, But anyway, I guess I'm
Yeah,
Where's
it is like very embedded essentially on the value that we have given onto ourselves and to the idea of who we have to be. And so we believe that, of course, to be part of this or that, for example, a company, business, you have to dress, be, look a particular way. And, it is not good or bad, but we just have to consider how we push the boundaries further and further each other. And now with the media, it's obviously even worse, I would say, because then, and as you were mentioning, Jean, with the marketing campaigns, obviously someone of high status, like a celebrity or a politician or else, can have a particular product, and then you have the rest of the people really wanting that product. So that need is created as an idea linked to the idea of value, of specialness, prestige, and that is sought then through consuming, through acquiring that one product. That then, as Maite was mentioning, maybe later on you realize that you really don't require it, but just the fact that you possess it, that you have the money to acquire it, is what becomes the snuff value, or the value that is simply for the show off. So, what can you tell us about how this conspicuous consumption, Maite, affects our economy, affects our lives? How does it disrupt it?
Well, in terms of the economy, well, of course, if you're going to promote making, if you're going to advertise and go do marketing to get people to buy products that they don't need, then you're going to run into a problem, because in terms of even the parent principles of the free market, it is not what you're supposed to be doing. Where we're now using and allocating resources to things that no one needs, that no one really wants, that no one really needs. And I mean, it's a total waste. And also considering that it really gives you a few moments of an experience of feeling good about yourself, especially the day that you come to the office with your new handbag, for instance, or your new shoes, and everyone comments about it, and then you feel really good, and the next day, well, it's the same shoes you wore the previous day, so no one's going to comment about it anymore. So it's like a continuous cycle. And if you look at fashion, especially, you've got your seasons. Now this is in season O, the next season it's something else, some other colors, some other fabrics that are now trending. So it's continuously, they're trying to make new things that are really the same things but just a little different, that are now apparently better or more worth pursuing. And it's constantly new things that are being made, continuously, instead of realizing, well, it's just curtains. The purpose of a curtain is to block the light. So let me buy a nice pair of curtains and it can stay there for the next 10 years. Or, but instead it's like there's people who literally redo the entire decoration of their house every few months because there's new curtains in the shop. So, I mean, obviously that's a total waste. And something that we really need to consider changing, because, I mean, remember, every curtain, for instance, I'm just saying curtains now, but I mean, every product that you buy is an actual physical good. I mean, there's actual resources that go into that. The cotton, there's actual cotton that needs to be planted. There's people that need to harvest this cotton. It needs to be woven. It needs to be made together. I mean, all these processes are happening the whole time. We don't consider that when we go and throw out old, perfectly good curtains and hang out entirely new curtains, maybe of a different color. So we are literally living in a physical world, and we really have this split between our ideas, which can be infinitely impulsed to change, where the one time you can believe that this is what you want, and the next month you're made to believe that something else is what you want or that you need. I mean, you can go on infinitely like that. And that is the pattern we're following. We're following the pace of production of our minds and our ideas and our unlimited ones more than we are the pace of the physical and the pace at which the earth is able to replenish itself. When you harvest cotton, how long does the earth take to replenish the soil and everything like that before you can grow new cotton on there? Things like that.
Yeah, there's also this idea that with conspicuous consumption, what is wasted is time and money. What's your perspective on that, Jean? Is it really only time and money? What is money, anyways? And how does this really apply as waste?
Well, that's a big question. I was just thinking about what Maddie was saying about the cotton and how conspicuous consumption is really the backbone of globalism, the offshoring of production and getting resources, and which include the physical resources of the earth and the physical resources of people from countries who have been almost invaded. If you read something like, there's plenty of information about that, but people sort of being displaced and forced into sort of these modern jobs that didn't exist 50 years ago in order to make these products. So there's so many repercussions to it. It's a displacement of the lifestyle. When you think about communities who lived in a certain lifestyle being separated, causing the young to go to the cities, causing traditional values to be eroded. And even in our own country, it's the same thing, where you had, and I'm sort of not answering your question, I don't think. But
it is, because it's not really only time and money that is wasted,
right.
But it's actually the disruption of the entire environment, people's lives,
right.
Animals get extinct, because, if you cut the trees to get your coconut oil that is highly demanded in our now organic lifestyle, we don't get to know how people's lives are affected that way. So I fully agree on that, and very cool that you pointed it out, actually.
Yeah, it's not just the the effects that we can see the effects immediately right now in third world countries or in developing countries of what they're going through, but even in our own country too, where we could compare and contrast what life is like now compared to what it was 150 or 50 years ago, where people had more community, they had more time together, they did things together. So the conspicuous consumption is almost like this. It's a kind of a cannibal machine. It feeds on itself, and it takes everyone with it. It takes the resources, it takes the time, the energy, the labor, and it's going to take you too. You're not going to be able to have the leisure to enjoy, the kinds of lifestyle that we could do. But we hear about post-consumer reality. So there is this now shift where there's a consciousness that, that this has to end. And so now we have austerity, which is almost like the flip side, it's the flip side to conspicuous consumption, which is the, contraction of the economy. And that also is not, something that we necessarily created consciously, but it's something that we're going to have to live with and figure out a way to recreate our definition of ourselves, because there won't be the availability of products and resources like there has been. So.
Okay, so we have a question from Gabriel, and I read it, and it seems that we have been discussing that from the beginning of the Hangout. But he's saying, since the beginning of humanity, there has been inequality that has been justified by race, religion, birthplace, etc., which has been used by some cultures to justify superiority towards others. And we see this being repeated today. What do you identify as the main pattern that defines this or creates this? Do you guys have a perspective?
Well, I would go back to this idea of meaning. People do require meaning, and I think that people will find it how they will. And in this case, given the limited choices in terms of the system we've created, it's natural that people choose outward shows of meaning rather than inward shows of meaning. even in the sense of the New Age, where you're paying to get, hopefully your consciousness will be evolved if I do X, Y, and Z. It's always outside of ourselves. So I guess that's my answer, but I don't know if it's...
Cool. We're moving on because we are kind of, we've already explained what conspicuous consumption is, but there's also a very important aspect that we'd like us to discuss, which is going into debt just because of following this trend of keeping up with the Jones, as Maite said. So Maite, tell us more about this, and how does this affect the household debt in general?
Well, that's a problem when you're trying to emulate the lifestyle of someone whose income is far bigger than yours. I mean, if you really want to do that, then you're going to have to spend beyond what you earn. And that is what a lot of people are doing at the moment, without really considering, well, the reality, or even wanting to face the reality of, this is my income. It's only so much. What will I do with this? But instead, that desire and that apparent need is so great that we will easily go and just use, buy something on credit. I mean, there's so many shops that offer, credit cards for that particular shop. It's so easy. You just go to that shop and you say, well, I'll buy it with a credit card and I'll pay it off later. I want this right now. I have this need right now. I want to satisfy it right now. Let me worry about the money later. And then, obviously this debt starts accumulating because you didn't really look at, well, what money do I have and can I really afford this? Me as being someone part of a different income bracket. So yeah, that's how it really, the ball starts rolling, where the more credit is made available, the more people actually start using and buying on credit. And then people are, the base problem that I see within that is people are not educated in terms of, how do I spend money, how do I manage money, how do I make sure that each month I can, if I do use credit, because I'm not saying it's bad to buy something on credit, but you do need to have a plan in terms of how are you going to pay it off, considering that the next month you will have other expenses again, and you might have unforeseen expenses. So you do need to manage your money effectively, and it's like we don't want to look at that. We don't really want to face the fact that this is the income we have, this is my reality, and it's just not the same as this other person.
Yeah, that's one aspect, and also what we don't realize is that there's people that do benefit from this immediate needs to get to such standard, and the bar keeps being raised every time through the media, which then become our peers, our environment, and in that we just lose perspective of what we really need, which, as you were mentioning, we do require that education to see, okay, how am I going to be spending my money in a way that I satisfy my real needs, what I really require to live in a good manner. So let's get on to the solutions, and first, before we jump into that, I have a comment from Adele, and she's saying, I know as a child trying to keep up with the idea of conspicuous consumption, especially coming from a low-income family, I imagined that I was judged by others because I didn't have the latest and greatest products, thus feeling inadequate. Thanks a lot for your comment. That's definitely part of how we create this peer pressure, isn't it? So, Jean, what would you say is required in order to, remove or align or correct this type of pattern that we have so embedded within ourselves as a society of conspicuous consumption within the context of living income guaranteed, which means we will get money either as a living income or a higher wage, which means we will see ourselves with this particularly higher amount in our bank accounts, okay? So what would you propose as solutions on how we can learn how to best, make use of it?
Well, I think our relationship to things has to change back to people. So I think the problem has been that we've created relationships with outward things as a definition of who we are, rather than our relationship with other people and our relationship with the world. So that would be the starting point I would think would be helpful to shift. And to also challenge the paradigm and to say, almost like have fun with it and not become so like an automaton, just following these impulses from the culture creators, that this is going to mean this and that. I mean, there was a time, there have been periods in history when people walked away from the culture creation and said, we're going to do it on our own. We're going to make our own clothes, or we're not going to buy clothes. We're going to share them, or we're going to, try an alternative way of living. So, and a guaranteed living income would be the starting point for us to really create a new paradigm where our value is based in what is alive and who is here and what we can do to support life, rather than commodification of life and having it based on who has the most or who can gain the most profit from it.
Absolutely agree. Maite, which are your perspectives?
Well, in line to what Jean also suggested, there needs to be more space for people to start to be able to consider what they actually really want and what is really important to them. Because, for instance, your relationships with people, even, you have relationships with things, but if you really look at it, the end goal is still you want relationships with people. You're just using your object as a way to connect with another. You want another to recognize you. You want another to respect you and to notice you and to see you. And we just have these things standing in the middle, where now relationships are very superficial and just like about, I give you a compliment, now you give me back a compliment. But in reality, we're really looking for connection. But it's like the pace of our lives is so fast, where, especially in terms of, you have to work a lot of time in a week. When you get home, you just you wanna feel good. You wanna reward yourself. So it's easy to just go and buy something, and then the next day someone's gonna compliment you on it, and then you will feel part again of the group, of the club, and it feels like we're now connecting with people and we're kind of doing it, and that's what we are able to do in the limited amount of free time that we really have. So considering, for instance, a suggestion would be to limit the amount of days, shorten the work week, to limit the amount of days people go to work a week, so that there really is more time for people to consider, well, what do I want to do? Because establishing real connections, having real relationships, or even having your own project, something that you really enjoy to do, that you really value, it takes time to develop these things. It's not some 1, 2, 3, here I have it. You really need to take the time, and that is one of the things that is scarce, so to speak. So relaxing, also because of the work we create a lot of stress. You want that immediate release. So you're looking for quick ways to feel good about yourself, or quick ways to feel like you're part of something. Instead of just let's slow it down. There are so many people that are out of jobs, and then those who are working all the time. So if we just loosen that a bit, let things settle, so that people can kind of breathe again and kind of like, okay, what do I want to do? What am I going to spend time on? That will already create, I think, a big difference.
Yeah, because also the fulfillment one comes through just giving money to obtain something physical that we can then claim as our possession and give power to it, or make it visible for others to recognize us as this person that has acquired a higher standard of living, for example. But instead you will dedicate to that which fulfills you as a living person, as your own expression, which is mostly what I see we are seeking, and also that connection that you mentioned, which is also very important. I would also say that obviously necessary education, we can start with children whenever they see that they want something because the other children have it, to really start questioning that need, that necessity for it, or if it is just the idea of getting more entertained with this or that object, that toy, or that whatever it is that is advertised these days for kids. And beginning with that, and also as parents, as educators, and everyone in essence, start also questioning ourselves in our own lives, of course. So we have various comments. So this is from Gabriel. This is a question. He's saying, Jean, so would you say that in this search of meaning and purpose, we have created like a breach of several ideas of what experiences are, which our experiences are more valuable than others? And from there, we have come to create all of these patterns of consuming as an experience.
Hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's the idea that experience or the consumption of experience will enhance our well-being. Well, as Maddie said, we don't even give ourselves the opportunity to just be. You know, breathe, find out what it is we're actually interested in. If you're working, 12 hours a day and you have like 3 hours to yourself, you have to cook, you have to clean, you have to, how much time do you have to really discover that, you might like to do pottery and you might be very good at it or any number of things like that. And so there has been this sense of how the market has brainwashed us into thinking, we've accepted this brainwashing that experiences going on expensive vacations or something like that is going to have a long-lasting, that's like the panacea. That's the little lollipop that you get from working the 12 hours.
Yeah, it's like the trend setting also of the more you have money, you get to know that, oh, people at your same level at work, they go to this or that super island for vacation. So now you have to go there because you have to keep up with them. And so we go placing like these absurd, like standards that we all go following and not even questioning, well, do I really want to go to a beach? Maybe I enjoy the mountains better. Things like that we have just taken for granted because it's about, being equal, being fitting in at the level of consumption, which is something that when we actually forget, obviously, the value of things, as Maite was explaining, the processes that go into it, the actual necessity of it, and that's also what we very much encourage everyone as part of our education and within the proposal of living income, wherein we encourage and propose that education on how products are created, how to best spend our money becomes part of that individual responsibility as part of our society. Because if we are going to get money, we rather use it in the most supportive manner. And we have, yes, Jean? Go for
No, I
it.
was just going to say there's this other element to it too, which is that we're being target marketed. Target marketing is this new development in the last recent years that you individually, every time you like something on Facebook, every time you go to a web page, it's all been documented. So there are these vast numbers of people, agencies, and businesses that all they do is look at consumer habits and target you. And we don't necessarily realize how insidious that can be. So it's to be aware of like where you might be vulnerable to marketing and how it is, just that there's an education there of just understanding the web of information collecting and how it's used and how we might not be aware of how we're being emotionally used. When we go to a movie, for instance, and there's emotional scenes, different ideas can be presented when you're in a vulnerable position that you are listening to, and maybe even you don't realize you're agreeing to them or accepting them as reality because it's there, because it's being presented, you think it's normal. So my thing is to just question everything. I mean, these things aren't just coming out of the blue. Sometimes it's, it's part and parcel of selling a product, is selling the individual to buy the product. So we have to be aware of how we're being, how our acquiescence in the marketplace is being manipulated too.
Yeah, and also how we participate in that, because yes, there are many ways to manipulate, but one is the ultimate buyer, and as we have been saying throughout these hangouts, the power of purchasing is actually a form of voting as well, so we vote with what we consume as well. Maite, any comments on this? And I remind you that we are now in our conclusion phase, so if you'd like to share the last thoughts.
Well, I think in general, what we're talking about is the statement that everyone knows, which is you cannot buy happiness. Um, and interestingly enough, it's what we're all trying to do. So I think that's something that, from, as you said, in terms of when children are very young, it's something that really needs to come through. If you look at the curriculum in schools, nothing is taught about value. That is not even discussed. Even relationships are not discussed. Communication is not discussed. Um, Psychology, so to speak, for a child to understand themselves, what they're experiencing, because a child may not even understand that they're being jealous and that they want something because they feel that they are not good enough compared to another. They will act on the experience, but they might not understand it for themselves. All these things that are so relevant, and that later on in life, when you've already taken it for granted and it's so ingrained, it can be used to manipulate you. So, I mean, at the foundation of when a person actually grows up, those are things that need to be addressed, and we really need to make space for both in schools and at home.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So education, once again, is quite the key here. Jean, any last comments? We do have another comment from Gabriel, so I'd like to read it before we end. He's saying, consuming experiences for searching meaning and purpose that apparently makes their lives, I would say our lives, because we're all included, to make sense within the ideal of this culture, like our culture, and also in relationships, as you have explained, I guess, Eugene, in terms of buying into the relationship ideal. I don't quite understand that last part, but yes, consuming experiences and buying ideals essentially instead of focusing on the utility and the basic principle of what we buy. So, Jean, now your last comments or conclusion for this as a solution more than anything, really, because we know the problem is extensive, but we're here to kind of create that seed of solution that we very much require in a world that is inundated with consumerism, advertisement, marketing. Yes. So, what do you propose we can do?
Well, the living income guarantee is the solution, of course, because it changes the whole game. The starting point is the consideration of others as yourself. So all the education in the world, in a sense, is I mean, if we're only going to educate people to go into the same system, how well are we going to be able to really help people in a sense? So it's about starting over, or starting from a new point, which is outside this model of profit as, labor equaling profit, that there has to be another way to distribute wealth and create wealth. So that would be my, solution, is that we reconsider our whole starting point of the commodification of life for profit. I know that sounds very abstract, but it is. The living income guarantee is the first step, that where people can start relaxing and be able to really look at what is valuable and where they want to put their time and effort.
Yeah, I fully agree on that, because when we start giving that first, let's say, starting point for everyone as money to live in dignity, then, as Maite was explaining, we won't any longer just think about, I get money, I have to consume, in an automated manner, without first questioning, okay, wait a second, who am I? What do I really want to do? Do I really need this? What is the purpose for it? And within starting questioning that, we will also give money another meaning, which is not only that of I need to spend it so that I can increase my own value, but start redefining value, questioning value in itself, which will lead us to further changes in our society, which are very relevant and very necessary, because this current lifestyle and the kind of hype and trends that we go into are not sustainable. Our environment is being very much affected by it. Animals, people's lives are disrupted. Our entire economy is based on only that, instead of considering people, resources, labor, interaction. So that's what the living income guarantee proposes as well. So thanks a lot, guys. Maite, any last words?
No, I'm good.
Okay, cool. Thanks for everyone that watched, and thanks for the comments. Randy Kraft, great hangout. Thanks for your perspectives. Thanks for your comments. So we got others. What this is about? Just watch the hangout and get yourself up to date to why we do these hangouts from the first one, which we've been doing this for 1 year already. So plenty to catch on to. So yeah. So let's keep going and for many years more to come. Thanks a lot for your time, ladies, for being here today.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, Moreno.
And see you guys next week, next Sunday at the same time in another Living Income Guaranteed Hangout. If you have further questions, either for Jean or Maite or myself, place them on the YouTube video as it is. And see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.